Hey everybody, welcome back to City Sowers. Today I'm going to talk about the garden and all the things that need to happen because spring is fast upon us. I am actually past my last frost date here already in Central California. Our last frost date was actually February 2nd, but we have had a ridiculously mild winter here, so I'm very distrustful of it. We only had two nights where we actually got below 32 degrees, which is, freezing. And I feel really distrustful of being, past the last frost date, because, there's always going to be a couple weeks of like wiggle room beyond that. So I've actually decided to put off putting my frost tender plants in for a little bit longer because I have a long enough season that I can do that. I would rather postpone a little bit and have my plants do well rather than having to start over because a late frost will kill them. The garden has gone a little crazy. I did come out here and do a soil test, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a couple minutes. But you can see the alyssum is huge. It blocks the walkway. But this is all going to be ripped out. Everything is going to come out when I'm getting ready here for the spring planting. But we did finally have one night, like right before our last frost date, where it officially got cold enough to kill my jalapeno plant here. And this is a Tulsi plant. They were kicking all winter until like 2 weeks ago, and they kicked the bucket. Things that will be staying in the garden are going to be all the garlics. This is all garlic here, and all the onions. The onions are in a cross formation in this bed, but everything else is going to be pulled out. And I have random garlics kind of spread everywhere. I have elephant garlic that's kind of sprinkled around in random places like this. This is an elephant garlic here in the corner of the bed. And then this is another kind of garlic. I would have to look up all the varieties that I did, but I planted different varieties in different locations around the garden. My 1,000 head kale looks good though. Nice and big, needs to be cut again. And then come check this out over here in the side garden. I've never grown cauliflower before, so I'm not sure if this is a variety thing or what, but come check it out. So I've got this cauliflower, and the plant is doing great, but the cauliflower itself, like the head, has got like this slightly purple kind of a sheen to it. And I know I need to pick it because it's starting to separate a little bit, but it's like, whoa, that's unique. Weird. But I actually got the cauliflower from my mom, so I don't know what this is. I have to ask her what variety she gave me. But yeah, it's cool and it's pretty. But then over here I've got the Romanesco broccoli. Look at that. That is so cool. That spiral. They're so cool and delicious. The fruit tree got some much needed TLC, or some vicious hacking. It really needed a hard prune, so we came out here and we hard pruned it. So it hopefully, we're probably not going to get a lot of fruit off of it this year because we hacked back all the fruit producing wood, but it's going to be better for it. And we actually are planning on coming back in next winter, and we're going to cut this whole limb off because that's actually the root stock that kind of took off where it shouldn't have. But we already cut so much off this tree, I just wanted to leave a section that would still produce some leaves for the tree to stay alive. So we'll hack that off in the off season next year. However, this thing does have praying mantis egg cases. There's one left on the tree There were 2 that were on branches that we took off, so they're kind of just tucked in over there so that they can hatch. And then there's 2 more over here on the apple tree. So there's one here and a big one up here. So that's cool. It's crazy. Like praying mantis egg cases, you can buy them online for like $12 or something like that. And I've got 5 of them right here. Just because they like the trees. So, yeah. Especially when you've got fruit trees, like check the branches that you're pruning off before you toss them, because those things are invaluable. Okay, now let's talk about the soil testing. Ignore the projector behind me. That's left over from Super Bowl, which was yesterday. I got this home soil testing kit, Rapid Test soil tester. I got it on Amazon. It came in a pack of actually 3 kits, so I have like a total of 30 tests, because each kit comes with 10 tests. You can check your pH 4 times, and you can check your NPK, or your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium 2 times each. And so I ran this test because I had a sneaking suspicion that there might be something up with the soil in my garden, because my fall garden grew so slowly. And like at first I was just kind of whatever, there's less sunlight. But I saw some of the gardens that were happening in my area that were exponentially better. So I decided to do a soil test, and I was right. Basic premise is that you're going to take a sample of soil below 4 inches. So you need to dig down deeper than 4 inches into your soil, get a sample out, and put it into a jar and mix it with water. You get your soil sample and you mix it 1 part soil to 5 parts water. So I just took a pint mason jar and put a 1/4 cup of soil in, and then added 1 1/4 cups of water, and then shook it. And then you leave it on the counter and let it settle. So you've got all the sediment down at the bottom. You'll get a few floaters at the top, but you want to test the water here. So because I've got all the floaters at the top, instead of trying to pour it out of this jar into these tiny test tubes, I decided to just use a baster and sucked it out of there. You can do it however you want. But so then you the kit has these capsules in varying colors depending on what you're testing for. So the blue capsule here is your phosphorus, and you put your sample of water in, and you just crack the capsule open and pour the powder in, and then cap it and shake it. And then it's got to sit for like 10 minutes or something like that for the chemical reaction to happen, for the water to color up and show you your levels. And so here is my phosphorus. And as you can see, the darker it gets here on the scale, the better, the richer. So I've got high phosphorus levels, which is great. And then I tested my potassium, which, like, the water changed almost instantly when I got the powder in there. So I knew I was good on potassium. So you can see it's nice and dark, nice burnt orange color. It's nice and high in potassium. But then I got to my nitrogen, which is supposed to be purple. So you can see low nitrogen is pale, high nitrogen is this deep maroon kind of a color. But this is what I got. Now, it's hard to see here on the camera, but this is almost colorless. So I had very low nitrogen, which, especially in the winter garden where you're growing things to eat the leaves, nitrogen supports leaf growth. So that explains why I had such a hard time with the fall and winter garden. So I have drawn up a game plan here for what I'm going to do to amend the garden. I'm not going to worry too much about trying to fertilize right now at this point, because everything's going to be pulled out very shortly. So rather than wasting my time on fertilizer, on like plant food, what I'm going to do is when I pull everything out, I've gotten a bag of bone meal as well as a bag of blood meal, and we're going to sprinkle that in, working into the top layer of the soil, and I'm going to be purchasing chicken manure or composted chicken manure that I will be spreading in the beds to help boost the nitrogen levels, because that's kind of what I have available right now. I can either get chicken or steer manure, and steer manure is great, but generally poultry manure is going to be slightly higher in nitrogen levels, and since I am so deficient in nitrogen, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And my other plan is that we now have rabbits, and we have a poop catching system in place, and so we're going to be putting in a scoop of the rabbit manure in with each plant as we go when I'm planting the plants. And I'll see if I have any left over. If I have extra rabbit manure, then I can apply that kind of in more of a widespread style. Another option that I have that I haven't decided on yet is that I could put alfalfa pellets in the garden because they will slow release nitrogen. So I am considering that. I've been doing my research and looking it up, and the alfalfa pellets, like, it's not expensive to get. A big 50-pound bag of them is only going to be like $15 or something like that at Tractor Supply. And so I'm considering doing alfalfa pellets as well. I have not officially decided to do it, but I am considering it at this point. So hopefully this spring and summer is going to be explosive with growth and with production. But yeah, kind of the big thing here is that I'm not 100% perfect. I don't know everything yet about the garden. I'm still absolutely learning as I go and making some mistakes. Like another thing that I've been learning this year is with my plant starts. I started my plants a little late anyway because like the time to start plants for me is like around Christmas time, and it's just too chaotic to start peppers and tomatoes. Like the holiday season is just, it's too busy. So I just put it off until the first of the year, which is fine. So I did that. But the problem is that the brand of soil that I have liked to use for my seed starting in the past is no longer carried by the stores. I could get it, but only in like the little bags, and on the scale that I'm starting things, it's just not worth it for me. So I experimented with trying a new kind, and it has not worked out. It has not panned out at all well for me. I have tomatoes that have been in their planters now for a month and are still only an inch tall, which is insane to me. I fed them, and I'm trying to baby them along and see if they'll recover. But I did actually go ahead and buy a new kind of soil, and we'll see how that goes. So the few things that I have already started in the new soil they're doing much better. So what I'm going to do is try and baby along the ones that are not doing great in the other soil, but I'm going to also be restarting like a copy of all of those in the new soil. And if both work out great, fine. I've got a dozen plants to give away. That's fine. But if, you know, babying it along just doesn't pan out and they end up dying, then at least I have something to take its place, and I don't have to start all over in March, you know, which, I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I have a long enough growing season, but it would be really disappointing. So I'm doing a whole lot of things this year that I haven't had to do before. It's all new learning experience, trying to fix the garden, I guess, fix it. A nitrogen deficiency is not the end of the world because it's one of the easiest things to replace. Now, I have not actually tested my pH, so we can actually do that together. I went out and I already got a sample of my soil here. That it's slightly fluffed up above the first line there, but I know that it's going to pack down just a little bit. So you can't really see the lines on the camera here, But there's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in increments all the way up the tube. And the directions are really easy. They're on the inside of the packet here, so flip the card open and it's got all the directions on there. Okay, so I have my soil sample here to the first line in the tube. Now our next step is going to be that we're going to take one of the green pH capsules and put it in the tube. Now you do have to actually open the capsule and pour the powder out, and it's really hard to not like explode them, so you kind of want to twist them a little bit, wiggle them until they loosen. Okay, now it's empty. 2 halves of the capsule. So now we have our soil with the powder on top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add water up to the 4th line, and then we'll cap it and shake it. That went just a little high, but there's an air pocket in there, so I'm pretty sure that that'll level out. Okay, so now I got the cap, and now we shake it. There we go. Get it all suspended in there. Okay, so now we're going to let it sit for a minute to kind of cure. Okay, so 1 minute has passed, and here's our soil sample. So it's there we go. So it's developed in the color. I mean, it's going to be a little cloudy because you got all that thick powder. But so now we can compare the color on the chart to figure out what our pH level is. And you can see it's not quite as dark as an 8.0, which is alkaline, and not quite as light as a 7.0, so it is probably just very slightly alkaline, which is not the end of the world. It's not like super alkaline, but most plants actually prefer their soil to be either at neutral or very close to it, either just above it or even just below it. Most plants have a little bit more tolerance for very slightly acidic soil versus alkaline soil. But I have not had a problem with growing plants in my soil before. I haven't really had things where they are not doing well because of pH. I mean, we know now that I have a nitrogen deficiency. But if I felt that I needed to alter the pH of my soil, like, oh yeah, okay, now what do I do? Again, this test does have recommendations for what you can do to change your pH, and as well it'll tell you how much it'll change your pH, which is really cool. Like, it's cool. Yeah, so I mean, I don't test every year, obviously, but it is good to test periodically. I feel, especially if you're kind of new to gardening, to know what you need to be targeting. When we put in our raised bed garden, we decided to try and cut corners on cost and mix our own soil, which I thought would be fine because I was able to get a bulk order of compost, and I put in sand and peat moss and all that, and I made this beautiful, fluffy, I was hoping perfect soil. But after everything was done, I ran a soil test on it, and turned out that there was no nitrogen in my soil, and I was blown away that I had gotten all of this compost. Like, how does it have no nitrogen in it? How is, like, nothing has even been grown in it yet? And I'm not sure how that happened. I ended up with a batch of sterile compost. Like, hello. So don't try and save money on filling your beds, because I have had an uphill battle since then with trying to get my nitrogen levels up. And so I probably will start testing every year, or even every season, every growing season, so in the spring and in the fall, just until I can kind of level that out and figure out what kind of targeted approach I need to make to get those nitrogen levels to stay up. I mean, obviously it'll be depleted every year from the plants eating it or consuming it, but it shouldn't be non-existent, especially when I did amend the beds when I planted. So it is what it is. Soil testing is usually, like, the home kits are going to do the big four: your pH, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium, or NPK. And when you are buying a plant food or a fertilizer, they'll have 3 numbers on it, and those are your NPK values. So, and they're always listed in order of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. The thing to remember is what each of the nutrients is for. The nitrogen is going to be like their primary food source that's going to promote their leaf growth. And so while that's great for like greens that you want to eat, your kales, your lettuces, things that you're harvesting the leaves of, is fantastic. And of course all plants need nitrogen because they need that leaf growth to photosynthesize. But if you are trying to grow something like a potato, you don't want a giant, you do want a giant, beautiful leafy plant, but you don't want to be promoting so much leaf growth that it abandons root development. And so that's where you're going to need your potassium and your phosphorus, because those are going to promote your root growth as well as your plant's defenses against diseases and pests and things like that. So if you have balanced soil, then you should go for balanced plant foods or fertilizers. There are some that are going to be different values based on what your needs are. If you need to up your phosphorus level, then you're going to find a fertilizer that has a high phosphorus or a high potassium. Many of the fertilizers will have a slightly higher nitrogen level though, because that's going to also promote your leaf growth, and it's going to have a more immediate, obvious difference. Like, it's going to be noticeable to the gardener. And lawn fertilizers, those are almost entirely nitrogen without having the nitrogen and the phosphorus, because you're growing grass for the leaves. And if they can get you to grow and use their fertilizer to get that nice beautiful leaf growth, but it's not supporting the root growth, and you see your grass dying back and turning brown again, then you're going to go back and go buy more, which is going to put more nitrogen in the soil, which is going to make the grass look green again, and it kind of creates this cycle. So if you run a soil test and you have a nicely balanced soil, then you can get nice balanced fertilizers. But because I have a problem, I have a severe nitrogen deficiency, I'm going to be targeting nitrogen sources for my soil. I hope that this video was really helpful for you guys, kind of walking through a simple soil test at home. Of course, you can get a more in-depth, thorough soil test by going through a lab, but that's going to give you more of your micronutrients, your boron, your calcium levels, like all these things that are going to be like so tiny you can't measure them at home. You need special equipment. But I'm not going to target that right now. I'm going to let the plants talk to me on if I need to supply calcium or boron or whatever, because the plants themselves will tell you if you're deficient in them. I mean, to each their own. If you want a more in-depth, thorough soil test, then totally go for it. The more information that you're armed with, then the more targeted approach you can have. I have just decided not to go that route for myself. I'm going to focus on fixing the nitrogen problem and see what happens after that. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, this is your urban nerd with a goat herd telling you you can grow where you're planted.